Right now, voices to narrate the terror. The 911 calls from inside Sandy Hook were released today, nearly a year after the Newtown massacre. We will tell you what they said. And then, driver's licenses being put in the hands of undocumented immigrants, just not in our region. Is this being practical, or is this rewarding illegal behavior? And later, our Law Talk panel returns their target drones. How much say do you really have over the airspace of where you live, or can anyone fly their drone right over you? The law has not caught up with technology on this one, but trust me, our legal team will. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, December 4th. We begin with the release today of those 911 calls from inside Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown 355 days ago. As you know, that release was ordered by a state judge because the tapes are public record. Well, we at RFL, and you can blame me personally, listened to the tapes and decided not to air them. But we will tell you what was said on them. And to do that and to sample the reaction in Newtown, we turn to FiOS 1 reporter Carolyn Fortino. She is live for us, joining us, as I said, from Newtown. Carolyn?
Well, good evening to you, Rich. That's right. The calls that were released today were made to the Newtown Police Department, many of them from inside the Sandy Hook school as the shooting was still taking place. Now, as you mentioned, we've decided not to air those calls tonight, but many of them do paint a much clearer picture as to what exactly happened during the Newtown shooting and the response by the police department. The first 911 call about an active shooter coming into the Newtown Police Department at 9:35 a.m. The caller told police in a trembling voice that she believed someone was shooting inside the school and even said, quote, "Somebody has a gun. I caught a glimpse of him running down the hallway." According to a report released by the Connecticut State Attorney's Office last week, it took gunman Adam Lanza just 11 minutes to kill 20 first graders and 6 educators before turning the gun on himself. One of the first calls released today came from head custodian Rick Thorne, who remained on the phone with police for several minutes, assisting them with the details of what he could see and hear from a corridor, calmly telling police that the front glass of the building had been shot out and that he could still hear shooting inside. The dispatcher on the phone is overheard saying to a colleague, quote, "Get everybody you can going down there to Sandy Hook." In the minutes that followed, staff members inside the school pleaded for help as the Newtown Police Department juggled the influx of calls. Dispatchers encouraging teachers to make sure that no one panicked, to keep their students calm and to wait for help. According to the state attorney's report, Newtown police officers arrived at the school within 4 minutes of the first call, but nearly 6 minutes passed before they entered the building as they considered the possibility of a second shooter. Lanza killed himself just 1 minute before police went into Sandy Hook. Now, Newtown School Superintendent John Reed has advised the parents of his community to limit their children's exposure to these 911 calls, and he's hoping that the community bands together as they move through yet another challenge. In Danbury, I'm Carolyn Fortino. Rich, let's send it back to you.
All right, Carolyn, thank you very much. We've been talking about the release of these tapes, the debates. This went through a courtroom. The parents of those poor children didn't want the tapes released, and there was much debate even among lawmakers in Connecticut, et cetera. But at the end of the day, a judge decided to do so. We're going to get into the legal rationale of that in a second. I never saw the compelling reason why I needed to hear this. There wasn't too much of a debate about the investigation. There was not an outstanding question about how it was conducted or what happened within the walls that day. That said, there was not unanimity on this subject. Some TV stations decided to air them today, some others did not. We were with the latter here. I did not decide it was a great call, but there wasn't even unanimity in our editorial meeting. Andrew, you disagreed, and you thought that there was a compelling argument, like others have, that these tapes should have seen air on this program tonight.
Well, I thought the first rationale for this was what wasn't on those tapes. It was not some blood-curdling moment. It was not some moment of
let me just, I don't want to disagree with you, but I will say 2 different people could listen to it and take different things. For me, there were some graphic images on. I heard gunfire on that. I mean, you hear gunfire if you listen to it. Again, with all the circumstances,
you could hear gunfire in the background. I don't think there was any question that we weren't going to air that portion of it. It was not the movie scene that I think some people might have imagined when they heard about the 911 tapes without knowing anything about them, that we were not going to hear the last moments of somebody's lives. We're not going to hear people screaming in the background, which I did not hear as I listened to all of the tapes. We heard people inside the building trying to explain to police what was going on in the building, and we heard confusion and chaos among police dispatchers trying to figure out where the incident was happening, what exactly was happening, and how you scramble the resources.
But your rationale earlier, Andrew, was, but time out, your rationale earlier, and I want to give you a chance to respond to this, was just like the debate about showing the towers falling after 9/11, that there is an anesthetizing element that we as people like to do, and sometimes it's at our detriment, because the shock and awe of that event should shake the consciousness of people. If you believe that we shouldn't play the gunfire in this, then again, you're being self-selecting also, and others are too. I mean, you're trying to, if you're not going to do that, then what's the whole point of doing it if it's not a shock to the system, as you said earlier this week?
Because I think people get the wrong idea about what happens or what might be able to happen inside those moments, inside those panicked moments when the worst is happening.
All right.
And presenting the real life version of what did happen, I think, is informative and illustrative.
Okay, except my only debate, and I want to bring in the table, let me at least introduce who you are before you start talking, Obi. But my only thing is, at the end of the day, I didn't feel that there was much confusion a year later about what happened there. There wasn't any cause for conspiracy, et cetera. But let's let the panel weigh in on this. Republican strategist and co-founder of New York Meeting, O'Brien Murray, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, of course, and here for legal analysis, part of our law team. We're going to be getting this in the second half hour with this legal question here. Jim Kasouris, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, and Andrew Whitman, who you met before. You've been itching to sound off.
Well, I was going to say, first off, you guys aired properly, not put on TV tonight. It's early in the evening. There's children watching with their parents at times and so forth. It's very different.
What if it was 11 o'clock at night? Should I have aired it then?
You may have had the opportunity, and it'd be a different discussion at that point. But what I'm saying is they were proper to release them to the public. They're online. You can go find them online, listen to them. 25,000 people just before the show, last I checked,
they're
had listened to them.
because the judge released
them. Right, correct. But my point is there's public access to them. Different venues are appropriate. And frankly, with the show an hour long, there is a lot of these things. There's some that are a few minutes long, some that are 10 minutes long, not mistaken. You need to be able to pick and choose which ones you want to listen to anyway. So for you to digest it and push it out there is not the best format possibly. So let the people listen to them and listen to what's appropriate in their own time when they want without having other kids around.
If they want to listen to them.
That's correct.
I mean,
right.
and that's the beauty of our system. You can provide access, and you know, the law may not necessarily be sympathetic. You are being sympathetic and exercising your discretion.
Well, explain this to me, though, because I'm confused on this part. How discretionary is it for the judge to decide? I mean, in the media, this might be too much inside baseball. If we want to see a document or we want access to something that is, let's say, in law enforcement's hands or whatever, we can file a Freedom of Information Act, commonly known as a FOIA. This was discretionary on the part of the judge. Not all 911 tapes that were involved in a police shooting or whatever are released. Is this up to the judge at the end of the day or no?
Well, understand, it first starts out with a commission. The commission recommends the release, and then the state attorney objected to it. And the bottom line is it's presumptive disclosure unless it falls within an exemption. And one of the exemptions is a continuing investigation, which is why normally 911 calls in a continuing investigation are not disclosed. To protect witnesses who would otherwise be threatened and so on and so forth. Here you have a state attorney giving a reason that really had no basis in law and candidly admitting there's an investigation in terms of finding out what happened, but there is not going to be anything prospectively put out there. There's not going to be testimony or anything like that.
The law makes the point for why the judge released it, and to your point, that this is now a matter of public record. I think in some ways the finding that there isn't an investigation, and just because you can doesn't mean we need to know and need to hear everything, Dominic, at the end of the day. I find myself fighting against some of the things that journalists always fight for, but at the end of the day, just because you can doesn't mean you need to.
Well, the reason why I'm being so quiet in this discussion is because I really believe it's a great night for American journalism tonight. Most major news organizations, responsible ones, they're not playing the tapes. They realize there's no journalistic value in this. Anyone that says different, A, doesn't know what they're talking about, or they have another agenda. So ABC, CNN, NBC. Well, I'm not talking about the locals. I'm talking about the nationals right now. Almost all the nationals have said we're not playing it. Fox played a little bit, but that's been it. And I think it's a great night for American
Dominic,
journalism.
one of the reasons they wanted them released, there's the investigation into what happened from a prosecutorial standpoint, but the media wanted them released because the other part of this was they wanted to measure the response of law enforcement vis-a-vis these
And
911
Jimmy,
calls.
I have
so
a
what's,
problem with
you
that,
know,
which is after a year, we found out the response times. It's not like there was some giant whitewash cover-up. If that was the compelling rationale, that there was a very open-ended question as to the response times, that this was listened to and heard to. I mean, I sometimes think, and Andrew disagreed with me, but I sometimes think we live in such a conspiratorial age that even if there was an appointed commission here with law enforcement, lawmakers, advocates, or whatever, if they all heard it and said, you know what? Yeah, maybe they could have done a few things different. At the end of the day, there's nothing negligent here. It's not like there's a suit going on, that this was at the center of it. Isn't that good enough for us, or no?
I don't think that there's a lot of validity to anybody who claims that this was somehow a conspiracy. There are people who think it was, but I don't think there's a lot of legitimacy to it. But I don't think that's the litmus test here. I think the litmus test is how we respond to crises like this going forward, especially since they seem to come up almost every week or every couple of weeks in this country with one gun-related incident or another. It's just the degree of how bloody it gets seeming to be the difference.
Being released now,
but
too, they can be used for training purposes, too, going forward, which if they hadn't been released, they couldn't have
That's
been
not what
for
today was
response.
about, so let's
Well,
be
no,
honest.
but it's also part
about,
of public
It's also about
dialogue.
information. And there's one other, that's the journalist in me, because I want to know what happened. I always want to know what happened, and I can turn my back and not watch what happened or not listen to what happened, but I want to know, and I want to have access so that I can know for myself and make up my own mind. The guy who wants to see greater gun control in this country, that part of me was screaming for these tapes to get out, because as we were going through
So
the
there's
numbers,
an agenda, in other words.
No. I'd like to think that I can wear both hats, and you know, I'll take your being appalled at me tonight with a grain of salt.
No, I'm not appalled with you. I think the experts have already decided what my point of view. The experts have already decided what my point of view. So there's no one needs to be said.
Everybody else's expertise as well. But the other thing is, we've lost 30,000 people in this country since Newtown to gun violence. 30,000 people, and not a damn thing's been done differently. And Ralph, I don't know if you have a chance to throw up what we have on A16. I went through today, and I spent part of my day trying to figure out what gun laws have been changed in different states since Newtown. And there's like 7 or 8 states that have had tougher gun laws. Connecticut and New York and New Jersey have passed them, and Colorado and California. And about 15 have loosened their gun laws.
But what does that have to do with violating the rights of these parents?
Well, you know what? You're not violating the rights of these parents. You're educating everybody else to what happened inside one of these situations.
So
that when somebody thinks, so that when somebody thinks they can play, excuse me, Dominic.
If one of them were your relatives, you can't out-yell me. If one of them were one of your relatives, what would you do?
They're not one of my relatives.
You'd have a different point of view. You'd have a different point of view.
For all these people who think that they can play John McClane or superhero when something happens inside one of these chaotic situations, I want people to realize how chaotic it is, and that you're not necessarily going to be able to solve everything if you've got a security guard packing the heat.
From bringing in the gun issue here, there's nothing from this incident that you can say could have changed the laws to make this any different, other than some issues with mental health. Mental health that is not a gun control issue specifically, because it was the mother who legally had the weapons.
It can change.
So it's very different.
But here's the other problem. First of all, and you know, Dominic, the fact that we would emotionally react differently if it was one of our relatives actually lends more support to what happened today, because you can't make decisions like that based emotionally. The law provides for presumptive disclosure. You may agree with it, you may not agree with it. There are always going to be people who disagree with it, but that is what our law is about. If you draw the line here, are you going to start moving the line one way or the other because the law is not good today, but it may be good tomorrow, and this wasn't as grisly, and this isn't going to affect people that much? Like I said, the law may not be sympathetic, and it may hurt people, but they don't need to watch. You don't need to air, but the law provides for disclosure and for whatever agenda is out there. It'll be used.
And I'm going to let that, on this subject, be the last word. Jimmy, we're going to come back with you in the second half hour here.